I mentioned my training in Japan in Zen Buddhist monastery, and I recalled a quote from a very famous Japanese Zen master called Dogen, D-O-G-E-N, Dogen. And well, let's see if I remember the whole quote. I'm usually bad at this stuff, but oh gosh, I don't remember the quote. But it has something to do with, it speaks about knowing ourselves, that the meaning of Dharma is to know ourselves. That's always the meaning of Buddhist training. Whatever lineage or vehicle one practices, that's always the core of Buddhist training, to know ourselves. So, like, depending on methods, depending on approaches, this can mean very different kinds of practices. How we come to know ourselves usually means developing the ability to concentrate, and then let's say, developing insight, seeing or looking what happens in our mind, and through that coming to insight. So it's usually, I'm talking about concentration or focusing, it's traditionally called samadhi in Sanskrit. So usually Buddhist training has like an element of concentration, building samadhi, learning how to concentrate, and in consequence, learning how to calm our nerves, calm our being, so that we can experience calmness rather than busyness or nervousness in our mind and in emotions. And traditionally, when that samadhi or shamatha is established to some degree, so that you can become calm when you need to, when you have acquired the ability to calm yourselves down, to remove your nervousness when you become agitated, then you have some shamatha skill, and then you can start vipassana practice, looking into our mind, what actually happens in our mind, how things in our mind, thoughts, emotions, how they arise, stay, and disappear, and what actually those thoughts are, what are they made of. So usually it's, also actually in Pemako practice, there are these two how should I say, two factors, shamatha and vipassana. However, in Pemako training, we mostly practice tantra, so the look of practices is a bit different than it is in the so-called sutric practices. We practice mantras, do chanting, do visualizations, use mudras of different kinds, and through those techniques accomplish the same thing, shamatha and vipassana. And having said that, in our style of, in our method of yogic practice, we don't do this gentle type of concentration. I've talked about this quite a lot over the years, and I've written a chapter about this in my book, What's Next. I've explained the difference between gentle concentration and dynamic concentration. And so we use a different kind of, different application of the same shamatha or samadhi principle. And so we don't really build up or learn a skill how to remain focused in one thing. Rather, with the use of dynamic concentration, we make a gap, make a hole in our mind, in our energetic body, so that our original condition or natural state, Buddha nature, Dharma Dhatu, can shine, can appear, can be made to appear. And this is this type of like dynamic concentration exercises that we do physically by contracting muscles or by shouting syllables. Methods that use this like special type of shamatha are quite few in the world. There are few schools in Tibetan Buddhism that does this, and then in Japanese Buddhism they do this a little bit, and then Japanese Shintoism they also do this. Like and actually Japanese Shinto, in which I was also trained, they are the only ones who, traditionally speaking, who use rhythmical shouting, not just 3, 4, 5 shouts, but 50, 100, 500 shouts. I once in Japan, that was kind of my initiation rite, in the training hall that I trained, there was this 3 days and 3 nights retreat, and it's quite demanding type of training, because you are shouting the syllables of a certain Shintoist prayer, very beautiful prayer, for I don't know, what was it, 12 hours a day, shouting on the top of your voice these syllables, just like we do in our practice. But so personally, that's how I already knew about using loud voice through Zen Buddhism that I did, but then I trained in Shintoism also in Japan, and that's where I got the idea for dynamic concentration, like we do it in Pemako Buddhism. And as you know, many of you know who have done the practice for some time, you know that it has a special outcome, a special benefit. So, so what I was saying is that there are differences between methods, differences between approaches, and differences between different vehicles of Buddhism. And in our approach, Buddhist training is always about shamatha and vipassana, those two. That's how we come to know ourselves. But in our style of Vajrayana practice, this shamatha actually means the recognition of the natural state. It doesn't mean learning how to concentrate or learning how to focus on one thing or an object for extended period of time, how long that might be. So this is a very, I think it simplifies a lot in a sense. In my traditional Buddhist training, in my background, I did a lot of concentration practices. And yes, I learned to focus on one thing, on an object, for long periods of time. But then I came up with the same problem like Shakyamuni Buddha did. He did many years of concentration practices of various kinds, and then had the problem of, he was pretty much the same person, had the same problems, had the same existential confusion like he did before he started those concentration practices. So, well, I just put it this way. If I thought, as the head teacher and a teacher of Pemako Buddhism that there was much benefit in doing that kind of gentle concentration practices, I would teach it. But as you know, I don't, because I think it's important to prioritize recognition of our true being, knowing we don't have that much time in our hands. Some of us present here are relatively young, some are middle age, some are already in senior age, but we don't know when our time comes, do we? I was just speaking to my friend yesterday, a very good friend of mine who's my tattooist. We've been friends for a long time, and I went to him yesterday to do some renovation on my old tattoos, and I was speaking with him, and he told me of his cousin who was a very famous Finnish rock and roll star in a very famous band in the 90s, and he died when he was 26 years old. 26. So, we just don't know when our time comes. So that's why I said that, we might not have that much time for training and practice. And I think that this is an essential question when thinking about that whether to use our time training in concentration, or if we use that same time cutting through the mind and creating that gap so that our natural state can shine through, so that we can really know ourselves as awakened, perfect, already perfect beings, as Buddhas. There's a big difference there. And this is how I see it anyway, that always prioritize knowing ourselves in the deepest, in the most profound meaning of the word, rather than doing things in a way that don't necessarily work so well just because that's the tradition, just because that's the old way. There's a bit of criticism in that, but I've done the traditional training myself, and like I said, I had the same problem like Shakyamuni Buddha. I didn't know myself, but to a tiny degree after several years of full-time training. So this is why I emphasize dynamic concentration rather than gentle concentration. Maybe I'll say something about the so-called Dzogchen view. Dzogchen view, or the theory view of Dzogchen or Ati Yoga. So, according to this view, everyone here present is already perfectly enlightened. And that's pretty much it when it comes to the Dzogchen view. So, in Dzogchen is a Tibetan word which is often translated as great perfection in English. It's Maha Sandhi in Sanskrit. But Dzogchen looks at us and looks at everything from the point of view when, purely and solely from the point of view of the great accomplishment, where there is only Buddhas. You can look at each other in the screen, and from the point of view of Buddha nature, from the point of view of Dzogchen, there is only Buddhas sitting here. Not sentient beings, but Buddhas. Let my words sink into your being, into your body and mind. Listen with that kind of listening, rather than thinking what I'm saying. Feel. There's no need to do anything special. No need to try to catch or realize something. In some sense, we are already Buddhas, already perfectly aware, already perfectly pure, already free. In our being, there is this body of Dharma, Dharmakaya, where mind phenomena arises and passes, just like it should. And that is also perfect. And all beings, all living beings, all sentient beings have this Buddha nature. From the point of view of great perfection, all beings are already Buddhas. Clean, clear, without confusion. So this Buddha nature is a lived experience. It's a way of living, way of being. Thinking is part of it. Feeling is part of it. Everything is part of it. we might have no thoughts or no thoughts at all. If you have a proper, valid recognition of yourself as a Buddha, because of this direct introduction or pointing out, then it makes no difference. You already understand that it makes no difference whether you have thoughts or not. What else makes no difference? Makes no difference. You can think yourself. Just see how you feel right now. I am not talking about a special state of one-pointed concentration. I'm not talking about some exalted heavenly state, holy state. The first patriarch of Zen Buddhism, Bodhidharma, who came from India to China, he said that when he was asked what is the meaning of his teaching, he said that vast emptiness, nothing holy. Vast emptiness, nothing holy. So we don't start floating in the air. We don't start to levitate. Rather, we land on our butt. So whether being a Buddha, having a proper valid recognition of one's natural state, it's just lived experience of being awake. Nothing else. Being perfectly clear-minded, soft-hearted, and grounded in the body. If in this awakeness, if you feel like resting your body, good, go ahead, let the body rest. If you have been very busy, have been doing a lot of things, it feels good to just rest. Just let that clarity, softness, groundedness seep into all cells of the body. On the other hand, if you're already rested, you might as well do exercise, go running, start working, whatever activity. If you have a valid recognition, you understand instantly what I'm talking about. There's no need, it's not this recognition of the natural state, it's not limited in any way by rest or activity, neither one. Each of us here is already a perfectly, fully enlightened Buddha. Can you feel that? Can you see that? Can you understand what I'm pointing to? And it's not only us, but all sentient beings that are already Buddhas. Dogs, cats, frogs, butterflies, trees, flowers, clouds, everything. The same awakeness in everything. I'm pointing it out. Do you see that yourself? Can you, through your own experience, validate what I'm saying? And what Buddha Dharma has been saying for a long time. When we chant absolute bodhicitta prayer, all beings are free, all beings are free, all beings are free. This is what it means. If you have doubt, if you're not sure, feel into me. You can look at my picture for a moment or just feel me with you. You know, here in Western countries, we have a history of Christianity. And Christianity speaks in terms of high and low. God or Jesus is somewhere far from us. Perhaps in heaven or on top of clouds, but not here on the level of people. People are mortals or something like that. Just small maggots on earth. So if you have like a foundational belief or an idea, if you have been affected by Christian or post-Christian thinking, which in a sense it's perfectly fine, but please don't confuse yourself by trying to, this lived experience that I've been talking about and pointing out to you. Obviously there's we, people in this session, we are already having glimpses and sustained recognition of ourselves as Buddhas. And as you can feel, as you can notice, we are not ascending to a place on top of clouds. We are not going into any other place than here. And in this here-ness, if I use that term, heaven and hell are both included. Heavens, hells, gods, demons, whatever, already included, empty as such, and therefore liberated. From the point of view of Dzogchen, or great perfection. I use the word here-ness, which is it's problematic, and a lot of Buddhist scholars and people who have read more than I have, would instantly raise a red flag. Here-ness, doesn't work. But I was just using that word, that concept, to clarify you this point. Of course, here-ness. Here-ness is also empty. Let's put it that way. And that will get me out from the leash. So, what about if we look at this lived experience, ourselves as wakeful beings, from the point of view of a few central concepts. Buddhist training is the only thing that it really does is to see through our false and mistaken self-based thinking or self-based concepts. This can be done in different ways. There is the philosophical way. I don't have much clue about that. But then there is the tantric way, the energetic way. But regardless of the method or approach, all Buddhist practices seek to try to enable us to see that all things, everything that happens in our mind is empty, does not have a solid entity, a solid self. That this sense of me-ness, I-ness, I this, I that, you this, you that, that this self-based thinking, Buddhist practice seeks to release that selfing, that continuous selfing that goes around and around and around and around and around and around for I don't know how long. So in a sense, You know, Buddhism says that all beings, including all people, have Buddha nature. Like I remember Tenzin Palmo, who is a Tibetan Buddhist yogini and a nun, quite a renowned teacher. She said that, you know, Buddhist practice has the potential to know ourselves as Buddhas, which is far beyond gods, far beyond some powerful beings. So it's sort of a pity that all beings really have this potential. All people you've ever met and will ever meet have this potential, but they go around in their minds, me, I, me, I, me, I, me, I. In a sense, it's funny. In another sense, it's tragic. So it's through that functioning of the mind that all forms of Buddhism seeks to see through. And by seeing through, which is a direct translation of the word vipassana, that's how we come to see the fact that we are already Buddhas. That's the Buddhist method. So our lineage, our style of Buddhist practice is called Pemako Buddhism. Pemako means or refers to Guru Rinpoche and his Pure Land. And because the founder, the founding Mahasiddha of our lineage is Guru Rinpoche, you know, he is one of the great masters who established Vajrayana Buddhism in Tibet. He was Indian himself. He was not Tibetan. But he, as you know, historically, he was the one who was the main guru, main Mahasiddha who started Vajrayana and transmitted Vajrayana to Tibet. And here we are doing the same thing here in the West in Pemako Buddhism, starting Vajrayana here in the West, in Western style. Nevertheless, because of Guru Rinpoche, because of his let's say Vajrayana style of Dharma, you know, we have this direct transmission, these sessions that we are having now, pointing out sessions, a direct introduction where the teacher, in this case myself, I'm pointing out to you what this Buddha nature is through experience, through verbal descriptions. This is how it is done in Dzogchen. Also in Tibet, teacher points out what this Buddha nature is, what it actually means when numerous masters of Buddhism have said that all sentient beings are Buddhas. So this is the Dzogchen view. We are already Buddhas. Already. Maybe it's useful, although I'm sure that most of you who have practiced with me before, it's already this, but in case there are people to whom it's not clear what is pointing out through experience and verbal explanation, what this pointing out direct introduction means is that you only need to feel what I'm saying. Simply feel what I'm saying to you energetically. It's kind of passing a flame from one candle to another. Isn't it interesting how powerful this concept that all beings, everyone here included, are already Buddhas? It's like if you feel into your energy body right now, it's like a revolution, isn't it? It's like your mind goes, what, can't handle, can't figure it out. But yet You get it. And that's the starting point with Vajrayana, that we are already Buddhas. We don't generate Buddhahood or Buddha nature. We already have the body of Dharma or Dharma Dhatu. If you start to feel some pains or aches because we sit still for extended periods of time, feel free to move a little bit, make yourself comfortable. If you had and have a proper valid recognition, doesn't make difference if you move or not. I'm sure if Manus was with us this evening, he would be dancing already. Maybe it's useful for me to point out another thing about this transmission, which is to ask you, first see how you feel. Just see how you feel. Is this how you usually feel? We've been at it for about an hour now. Did you feel like this 1.5 hours ago? Or was there some change? Was there some shift? Was there some kind of recognition that you usually don't have? If there is no change, wonderful. If there is change, here's the question. Did you do anything for that change to happen when this pointing out started? Did you do anything to get it? That's the whole point. You didn't, I'll use the analogy of clothing. We take a shirt and we put it on, and then we have the shirt on. There was a moment when we didn't have a shirt, and now we have a short shirt because we put it on. And there was an act to do that. But with pointing out, with direct introduction, you don't do anything. It's sort of like the candle simply catches the flame and starts burning. because each of us here already has Buddha nature. If you have energetic sensations or heat, warmth generating in the body, that's because of that recognition, your samsaric body, karmic body starts heating. And that's good. That's tummo in Tibetan, chandali in Sanskrit. Oh yes, I got sidetracked somehow. I was talking about these concepts, self-based beliefs, self-based thinking, me this, me that, I this, I that, me, I, in all kinds of forms. So we've been marinating for about an hour. So I think it's a good moment to stir it up a little bit. So the whole meaning of Buddhist practice is to know ourselves in common language. And this knowing of ourselves comes through seeing that all things, all phenomena, all emotions, thoughts, all kinds of energies that happen in our mind are empty. That all, in classic language, that all phenomena is empty of self. And that insight or insights, shifts can be had if we don't address the self-based thinking, self-based mind habits. You know, it's of course also a revelation to have a recognition of this clear, pure, ageless, timeless selfless awareness, selfless awakeness. It is very important to have this experience, this recognition, which again, it's the first mode of the two-part formula. But we can, according to the Buddhist theory, we can know ourselves only if we look back into the mind and its self-based habits. So let's do that. Right now, you can remember or recall how you usually feel in your day-to-day life. You can think of yourself as, you can think of your name, your daily life, your routines, how you usually feel, how you react usually, how you have strong emotional reactions or milder ones. Just bring back your usual self, your usual meanness. Kind of invoke it back. Yes, good. You can remember, and it's not that hard, I think. It isn't hard for me, at least. You can think how you got irritated earlier today or yesterday, how you got angry, how you got anxious, how you got bossy, how you had a strong desire of something. Desire. Sexual desire is a good one. Like a strong sexual urge. Simply think what usually happens in your psyche. And when you invoke it, feel it. Feel it fully, not pushing it down, not putting a lid on it. Completely give your body, give your whole being to that usual self. And from that recognition of the natural state, awakeness, you simply feel into it. You don't try to control it in any way. You just let it come. Come into you, come over you, and simply remain aware. How does it feel? How does it taste? What's the texture of it? What's the feel of it? What is this usual sense of meanness, I-ness? My habits, my patterns, my reactions, my irritatedness, my panic attacks, my social anxiety, my fits of rage, my frustration, my sense of loneliness, my sense of being unworthy, Feel it fully, voluntarily. Stay with the pain, stay with the confusion. So we experience all these states of mind, all these emotions, all these selfing in our day-to-day life. And that's dukkha, or existential confusion, often translated as suffering in Buddhism. Here we are voluntarily opening our internal can of worms. We might feel awful doing this, but that's exactly the purpose of this. To do this voluntarily, not pushing it away, not trying to control it. So that we can see through these selves of our mind. See through, vipassanize. you can and you need to make this exercise, this practice your own. When you understand the logic of what we're doing, make it your own. Take it from there. Make it work for yourself. Think of how you can apply the instruction into your unique case. You can also think of like emotional numbness you might have, emotional dullness, or the sense of dullness in general, fogginess of mind that you might have, or subtle lack of clarity that you might have. You can bring those kinds of emotional states, energetic feelings back and feel it fully, voluntarily. So here we have shifted from the Dzogchen point of view to, or absolute point of view to relative point of view. And here we have to admit that the reality of our state or condition instead of confusion. Bang. And from this perspective, we experienced it. We already had and continue to have recognition of ourselves as pure beings, but there is more to it. As samsaric beings, not yet attained Mahasiddhas, we have this stuff. When we do this exercise, use the second mode, self-based mode, as an attained Mahasiddha or a Buddha, nothing will happen. We can think of the strongest fits of rage we've ever had, worst fights we ever had, and nothing happens, because those self-charges have been seen through and released. So a Mahasiddha can think of anything and it won't stir up anything. Without anxiety, without panic attacks, without blinding desire, without greed, without dullness. We have more time left, so please invoke your usual sense of self again. Bring it back, perhaps from a different perspective, other kind of sense of self. It can be gross sense of self, subtle sense of self, or very subtle sense of self. And then again, after you invoke it, after you bring it back, just stay with it, not controlling those energies, those feelings, simply remaining nakedly aware. Meeting that confusion directly, plainly. Seeing through the self again. And through doing this, becoming whole, healing, integrating bits and pieces of our psyche back, becoming whole. if you feel that, oh, I don't really feel like doing that, you know, it's achy, it hurts, it doesn't feel comfortable, who is doing that? Then you already have material for your Vipassana practice. If you try to avoid, because there's a self, there's me avoiding it, not wanting to feel awful. So you can use that. May all beings be free. All beings are free. May all beings be free. All beings are free. And on it goes in our practice. Those two perspectives alternating. Relative and absolute dancing together. Coexisting. Staying with it until it pops, or until it calms down, disperses. through this kind of practice, through Vipassana practice, there are many different kinds of forms that Vipassana is taught. This is the way how I teach it, kind of a Mahamudra style, tantric style version, energetic. But it becomes obvious, we Buddhists are heavy on compassion, wishing or practicing to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings, for the sake of all beings, all physical and non-physical beings. That's a big one in Mahayana Buddhism. Actually, the main engine, if I can use that term, in Mahayana Buddhism. When we see through our habits, selfing, we can actually live. We can see through living experience that our burden becomes less, our confusion becomes less. From that experience, it is very unnatural to start thinking that it is unnatural to think of not wanting the same for others. Do you understand? Of course, we want others to experience the same increased clarity and freedom. And that's bodhicitta, that's compassion. I always say that, if the way how you can check if your recognition of the natural state is correct or not, is you can start thinking of all sentient beings around you. Can be just people around you. If you have a correct recognition, not much will happen, because all sentient beings are already, have that all sentient beings are already included. But if there is a big shift, then more work to do. Something that might be also useful to, this is how I see it. When thinking of compassion, is heart related and has a kind of sense of softness, energetic softness, heartfulness to it. But compassion, on the other hand, is not an emotional state. To be compassionate doesn't mean feeling like shit, because samsaric beings feel like shit. Having compassion, in one sense, to make my point as clear as I can, means to have clarity and wish that same clarity of mind and softness of heart and groundedness of being for all. And for doing that, you might have like the expression of friendly kindness or not. The point of compassion is to remove self-delusion. And as you know, self-delusion is sticky. It's very, can be a very, solid, rigid belief in people's minds. So sometimes to be compassionate means to be strict, be dynamic, be wrathful. All parents know this. When we raise our children, sometimes you are, very soft. Sometimes you have to be very strict for their sake. Let's do a little bit of chanting to finish this evening's session. Let's just chant not the whole list of basic prayers, but may all beings be free for a few minutes. Those of you in teacher training, you can now feel into the energy of the group and see what changes with this chanting. Helps a little bit with the bodies. So when we chant in our daily prayers, may all beings be free, you can first feel your own body, see how you feel, and then feel into the space around you. Into that space, for example, I'm in my own apartment now, and there are other apartment buildings around me and people on the street. I'll just feel into the space where other people are. Get some kind of sense of beings around you. And you can extend your attention far, far away into a huge space. That's the space where other beings are. Human beings, animals, non-physical beings, everywhere around us. And when we pray and chant, may all beings be free, we're chanting so that they hear it, so that they hear you, so that they feel you, that they feel this bodhicitta. You're not only chanting it to yourself, although it's your motivation, but you're actually expressing this natural state with this prayer. So let's chant a little bit. May all beings be free. 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 Feel into the meaning of bodhicitta, of compassion.